Police are trying to figure out how a baby died this afternoon. It happened at a Kansas City home at 41st and Forest.
Neighbors heard screaming, ambulances arrive, and then a baby's car seat carried from a home at 41st and Forest this afternoon.
Obviously, when 40 cop cars showed up, everyone was out here trying to figure it out and piece it together.
He just told me that he can't tell me much, that there's an active death investigation inside the home, and that nobody in our neighborhood is currently in danger.
Right now, police are calling that death investigation suspicious.
Have you ever accidentally suffered a burn? If you have, then you know how incredibly painful and agonizing burns can be. This is the developing case of a 26-year-old mom who claimed to have mistakenly placed her 1-month-old baby in an oven rather than a crib when it was nap time.
A horrific incident in Kansas City has sent shockwaves across the United States, where a mother allegedly killed her 1-month-old infant by placing her in the oven.
This Missouri mother is Mariah Thomas, and the little baby did not survive. Officials did not give out any info as to the child's name or gender, but we came to learn that this little girl was called Zariah. It is an awful case, made even more intriguing as Mariah claims it was an accident. What really happened? Join us as we dive deep into this developing story. It's hard to believe that we were all once as helpless as little Zariah, who tragically lost her life at just 1 month old. We mean, it is sadly not uncommon to hear about parents who unintentionally expose their children to scalding hot water, with emphasis on unintentional. Something like that can be classified as an accident. Can this really be an accident? Zariah's tiny body was found covered in burns. Why was Zariah, a 1-month-old baby, found dead with severe burns? What could possibly have been the reason? We would like to argue that this can, in no way, be put on the same level as an accidental scalding. Her mother did that, She placed her in the oven to bake. She placed her there and turned the oven on. She must have heard her screams and perceived that awful smell of flesh burning. It truly is a horrifying thought. How could a helpless infant be subjected to such unimaginable pain? To have a better understanding of the case, let us take a step back to Friday, the 9th of February 2024, and pay attention to the sequence of events as they unfolded.
The accused mother, Mariah Thomas, has been charged with endangering the child's welfare by the court of law.
On the day of the incident, Mariah and baby Zariah were left alone in the house. Notably, Mariah still lived with her parents. It was a routine arrangement as Mariah stayed at home to take care of the baby while her parents went out to work for the day. Now, Zariah's grandmother typically calls her husband around 1 p.m. each day, and on this particular Friday, she came back home and made the same call not long after. Only this time, something had gone terribly wrong. When she phoned him, she urgently requested his presence, indicating that something was wrong with the baby. Zariah's grandfather arrived at the house before the first responders and was immediately greeted by the smell of smoke. Rushing to the baby's crib, he discovered Zariah with visible burns. And to make things worse, she was unresponsive. Kansas City police responded to the home shortly after, say, sometime before 1:30 p.m. that Friday, for a report of a non-breathing infant.
Kansas City police officials reached the crime scene after the horrific incident was reported on February 9th at 1:30 p.m. local time.
The authorities found the child suffering from apparent burns. Paramedics pronounced the infant dead at the scene. When questioned about the incident, Mariah Thomas claimed that she was putting Zariah down for a nap and mistakenly placed her in the oven instead of the crib.
The documents filed in the court, Mariah told her grandfather that she thought she put the child in her crib and she accidentally put her in the oven.
This explanation is not only ridiculous, but also downright enraging, placing a baby in an oven and turning it on, mistaking it for a crib. It is unacceptable. Breaking news investigative reporter Amanda Yen confirmed just how badly the little girl had been burned. She reports that the police arrived just in time to discover that the onesie the baby was wearing had melted, so much so that it was now fused to the diaper. Amanda also had some insights as to Mariah's state of mind the day before the incident. Amanda had spoken to a friend of Mariah's. This friend had spoken to Mariah the night before and noted that she wasn't feeling her best. However, this friend emphasized that there were no indications of homicidal thoughts or erratic behavior during their conversation. Just like everyone else, Mariah's friend was shocked to learn about the tragedy the next day. At this point, we would like to establish a heartbreaking fact. Prior to Zariah's birth, Mariah Thomas had often expressed frustration about her pregnancy multiple times. She posted about being tired of being pregnant, among other complaints. While we would like to tag those posts as a red flag in this case, we don't think we can. We mean, there are so many women out there who felt terrible during their pregnancies. From reoccurring awful symptoms to body changes, not everyone loved being pregnant. Fortunately, this does not automatically equate to bad mom. Postpartum depression aside, most women fall instantly in love with their little ones when they arrive, no matter how much they hate being pregnant. So, with this in mind, can you really say that Mariah's rants when she was pregnant should have been a red flag to people around her of what was to come? Should all women who express frustration about their pregnancy be treated like red flags, or considered likely to potentially harm their children? If you believe that the answer is yes, then wouldn't that also mean that her parents have some fault in this? We mean, if they should have considered her dangerous to their grandchild, shouldn't they have been wrong to leave the baby alone with Mariah? We remind you that Mariah Thomas was not a juvenile mother. At 26 years old, she is a grown woman who should have known better. At this point, let us take a look at this case from the angle of a possible defense. You would agree that the primary focus of this case, so far, essentially revolves around understanding how Zariah passed, with the primary spotlight being on the oven. Rightly so. We mean the oven is the crime scene after all. Naturally, we imagine that the initial focus and mindset of the defense would be one that revolves around mental health issues and disabilities, as opposed to the clear intent behind the conscious actions of activating the oven, placing the child inside, and watching the excruciating pain that the child endured. We believe that whoever decides to take on the defense has their work cut out for them. When you come across the headline 26-year-old Missouri mum charged with baking her 1-month-old child to death, it is almost impossible to feel any kind of sympathy for said mother. So we imagine that it would be difficult to convince anyone, much less a jury, that this woman is not guilty. Unless, of course, the defense takes the most obvious route, which in this case would be an insanity defense. That this incident was an accident is a defense strategy that simply will not fly. There were just too many steps involved. First, the act of opening the oven, placing your baby on the rack, closing the oven, and cranking it up to, who knows, 400 degrees? In what world can all of these steps be classified as an accident? Just imagine little Zariah in the oven as the temperature rises. She's screaming, she's suffering, and she can barely comprehend any of it. All the while, her clothes melting until she eventually succumbs to the burns. One thing Mariah Thomas did that we believe is pretty damning in the eyes of the public is the fact that she chose not to provide a statement to law enforcement. First, she remarked that she had accidentally done this. But as soon as she was read her Miranda rights, Mariah stopped talking. It is alarming that despite the gravity of the situation, Mariah opted to exercise her Fifth Amendment right to remain silent rather than provide a statement. Even worse, this decision reportedly did not stem from a place of overwhelming grief, but rather from a conscious choice to refrain from speaking. At this point, we would like to just clarify that this is only damning in the eyes of the public. In the eyes of the law, this is not an indicator of guilt, and certainly cannot be used against her by the state. You see, during a trial, the prosecutor cannot make arguments in front of the jury regarding the defendant's decision to remain silent. Bringing up this matter during closing arguments, or at any point in the case, could result in a mistrial. And this comes with some level of prejudice as well. So it means that there won't be a second chance. We recognize that it is crucial that the prosecution does not mess that up, but it is a sad fact. But even before there can be a defense, an extensive investigation has to be conducted. And this has to be done objectively and devoid of sentiments. Notably, a detective's investigation focus would center on gathering corroborative evidence that leads to the fundamental question: was this premeditated or the result of another form of impairment? The detectives would examine every evidence of basic cruelty. They would examine if she was truly alone that day or if someone else was around and complicit in the crime. There are also unanswered questions such as Mariah's phone activity, search history, and text messages that are yet to be seen. We imagine that these are all crucial elements that are important to law enforcement at this time. For this reason, they would need to maintain a somewhat detached focus, concentrating on securing and verifying all the evidence that could point to what ultimately happened to Zariah. If the investigation, and by extension, the defense can all prove that this mother, Mariah Thomas, was mentally unsound at the time the incident happened, then you would agree with us that a guilty verdict or plea cannot be endorsed. So what if Mariah Thomas is indeed mentally unstable? What if she requires a committed treatment that would extend for the remainder of her life? We certainly don't mean a brief stint of treatment followed by release. We mean an extensive treatment regimen. And in the chance that she becomes mentally stable down the line, do you think she should still face the wrath of the law?
Records do not show if Thomas has an attorney representing her. If convicted, Mariah Thomas could face life imprisonment of 10 years according to the Missouri state law.
Then again, we cannot rule out the damning fact that Mariah Thomas was insane when she baked her baby in the oven, but suddenly became sane enough not to incriminate herself by talking to the police afterward. Sadly, there have been one too many cases very similar to this one. In cases of insanity, most of these baby killers cannot comprehend what they have done, or when they do, they are visibly and uncontrollably horrified at what they have done. Wouldn't you say that the most likely reaction of a mother who bakes her child alive would be frantically trying to explain that she did not know what she was doing? At this point, we would emphasize the importance of Mariah's medical history, with special consideration to her mental health. Perhaps it is also crucial to consider if the parents were aware of any diagnosed conditions Mariah may have had. Even from a Child Protective Services standpoint, historical information about Mariah and her household is crucial when determining the risk assessment in this case. The Child Protective Services is expected to look into prior investigations, the number of children in the home, Mariah's personal characteristics, her history of mental health issues, developmental challenges, her perception of the incident, and any previous involvement with CPS either as a child or a parent. On this note, we guess you could blame the parents. If Mariah had a history of any kind of mental illness, then leaving their grandchild alone with her for extended periods was certainly not the best thing to do. Considering that Mariah Thomas was part of the general population, one would think that she has not been diagnosed with any mental disorder that would warrant segregation from the general population. Still, there is some evidence to point to something entirely different. Amanda Yen confirmed that the friend that she had interviewed also revealed that Mariah was mentally ill. This friend also said that Mariah had been on medication for her mental illness, but that the doctors had told her to stop taking it while she was pregnant. Certain medications can affect a baby's development, so medical advice like this is not uncommon. The problem now lay in the fact that after Zariah arrived, Mariah was unwilling to go back on her medication. Amanda reported that a friend once asked Mariah if she had gone back on medication once the baby was born. Now, Mariah had told her no, and also failed to give a valid reason why she took that stance. Isn't this a huge part of this story? Everything seemed fine in the morning when the parents left. Everyone was reportedly in good spirits. The baby was dressed and changed. One minute, everything was okay, and the next minute, she opened an oven and put the baby inside of it. Prior to the case, Mariah Thomas continued to remain active on social media. She posted pictures of herself and Zariah, together with the most heartwarming captions on Facebook. January 21 Steve, she writes, "My goal this year for 2024 is to be the best mother I can be to my beautiful daughter and to stay out of drama and to get a place for me and my daughter and for only me and my daughter." 5 days later, Thomas posted, "I don't have any friends at all." This is sad, man, and the ones I do got only are with me on their own time. An extensive look at her profile page would show that she had good days and bad days. No matter how sick or depressed Mariah was, Zariah certainly did not deserve what happened to her. Considering that there are burn victims and survivors out there, can you just stop for a second to imagine just how much of your body has to be burned before you can literally die from burns? We are certainly no experts, but we do know that the skin is the largest organ of the body. As such, it protects everything. However, there are secondary causes like dehydration, infections through the skin, and fluid imbalances that could cause someone to die from a burn. Then again, there are many different types of burns, and people who die in fires typically have carbon monoxide poisoning, not just burns. But for burns, you lose the outer layer of your skin, which is the largest organ in the body that protects you against fluids and infection. In the absence of an autopsy, experts can speculate that baby Zariah might have died from an infection or hypothermia. It is gut-wrenching to think of. As for Mariah Thomas, we may probably never find out why she did what she did. There was nothing wrong when the parents left that morning. So why did she all of a sudden kill the baby? What happened on that morning when she was seemingly okay? These are questions that the state has to provide answers to. She now faces charges of first-degree endangerment to the welfare of a child and death of a child. At this point, all we can say is that we hope to see swift justice for little Zariah.